What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to go over the top 10 Copper Age keys. Which ones look like they might be good to buy right now, which ones to avoid, and which ones to just watch. Let's get into these books. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I want to thank everybody who gave their feedback on the poll that I put up on the YouTube channel for what I should do for the next top 10 video. I got a bunch of great ideas that I'm definitely going to be using in the future, but for this one, I went with the topic that got the most votes, and that was the top 10 Copper Age keys. That's what we're going to be going over here. Now, this video, like the previous top 10 videos that I've been doing recently, is going to be split between my channel and the Fanalytics YouTube channel. So on my channel here, you're going to see numbers 10 through 6. Then you're going to jump over to the Fanalytics channel to see numbers 5 through 1, as well as all of that consolidated data together so we can see which ones look like they're the good books to buy right now, avoid, and watch. Now, like I've been doing with those other videos, I have got a giveaway that's going to be part of this, and if you want a chance to win that giveaway, you're going to have to go over and watch the second half on the Fanalytics channel for how you can win this book. And the giveaway for this one, it is a low-grade copy, don't get me wrong, but it's a pretty cool book. Early Silver Age key. We've got X-Men number 7. You can see it's missing a piece on the cover there, but it's X-Men number 7. It is the second appearance of the Blob. Silver Age key for Marvel, so I thought this would be a cool book to do as the giveaway. So make sure to go over to the Fanalytics channel after you watch this video, of course, for a chance to win this book. All right, now let's get into the topic at hand. That is the top 10 Copper Age comics. Now, for this, I used just a general time period of 1984 to 1991. So it's books in that time period. I picked 10 books, not necessarily on value, but what I think are on average the most influential books, the most important books of that time period. Now, there are definitely some that I couldn't use because they just don't sell enough. They're too rare. You don't have enough sales data to really use them for this type of analysis. So you've got things like Albedo number 1, Bone number 1, Crow number 1, those types of books that, yes, they are big Copper Age key books, but they just don't sell often enough to really have enough useful data. So I did not include books like that in this analysis, but I still have some great books that are part of this, so let's get into these. All right, so here we are with number 10, and if you haven't watched one of these top 10 videos that I've done before, I'll give a brief little overview of the information that we've got on the screen here. We've got the book, the cover of the book, then we have some CGC census data, because I like to show how many of these books are out there, especially in the grade that we're looking at. You also see that I've got a specific grade called out. So what I do is I like to use the most common grade for that comic. The reason is because that means that that grade is going to sell more often. I'm going to have more sales data and more likely recent sales data that I can use to make these analyses on this book. Now, on the bottom there, I also have some pricing information. I have what the current price is. That's what the book is going for right now, what its annual return was prior to the comic boom. So I'm looking at what this book was doing prior to the comic boom, and then what I am doing is I'm extending that like the comic boom never happened to today. So we pretend that the jump in prices didn't happen from 2021 to 2022, and that they just continued on their annual return rate from 2020. And then we have the estimated value of what it would be based on that annual return and whether we have an upside or downside potential with this book. That tells us if maybe we should be looking to buy this book right now, or if you want to avoid it because it still has some room to drop. So number 10 here, the first book that we're going to talk about is Swamp Thing number 37. This is the first appearance of Constantine. Unfortunately, he is not on the cover, but this has become a pretty popular book. He is a little bit more of a fringe character, but the magic side of things that he brings has gotten more popular, especially with the Justice League Dark side of things, with the popularity of Zatanna. And so this book has become a bigger book from this era. Now, the most common grade is a 9.6. That is a trend you will see across a lot of these books from this era. You have some very high grade copies available from the Copper Age from 1984 to 1991. So the most common grade is a 9.6. Total census 3,883 copies of this book on the census, with 3,718 universal. When I say universal, I'm talking about the blue label CGC books. Then total 9.6, there are 832 with 797 universal copies. Now, the current price for 9.6, this book is going for about $500. It's pre-boom annual return. So I looked at from 2015 to 2020. I used compound annual growth to calculate this and to also estimate the future number was about 11%. So it was returning about 11% on average year over year for those 5 years leading up to the comic boom. This book in 2020 was going for around $300 prior to that boom. So with an 11% growth rate, it would be a $410 book today. That, you can see, is quite a bit below that $500 current price, meaning there is an 18% downside right now. So this book really did get hot during the comic boom, kind of, I think, just tied to Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing got really hot as well, and it has corrected about 50% so far. It peaked in a 9.6 at just over $1,000. So it has corrected about 50% so far, but I think it still has a little ways to go. All right, let's move on to number 9. Now, this one may be a little bit controversial. I picked X-Men number 266. I did not pick X-Men Annual number 14, even though, yes, I do recognize that X-Men Annual 14 is the first time that you see Gambit. He's on multiple pages, all of that. But this is the book that most people actually want. It's like Hulk 180 versus 181. This is the one where he's on the cover, and this is the one that most people are going after. Gambit is a very popular character, so to me, this is one that has to be part of a top 10 list of Copper Age books. Now, the most common grade, again, was a 9.6, but you can see a lot more copies of this have been graded than that Swamp Thing number 37. Total CGC census for this book, 23,328 copies, 19,928 universals. Just in a 9.6, there are 6,314 with 5,409 universals. That is more than all of the Swamp Thing 37s. And it's really interesting if you start looking at some of the older videos I did, the Bronze Age keys and the Silver Age keys, you really see how different these numbers are as the eras get more and more recent. There are just so many more copies of these books when you get into the Bronze and Copper and Modern Age. Now, the current price for a 9.6 is going for around $265. Now, I had to pick 2 time frames for this one for the annual return. And the reason is, from 2015 to 2020, this book was completely flat. And you will see that in comics periodically, where you'll have a big spike in prices for whatever reason, and then they'll stay relatively flat for a few years, and they might get another spike and stay relatively flat. It's not always year over year you're getting a constant return. Sometimes there are these jumps, and then it regulates for a while, then it jumps and regulates for a while. And that's what we saw from 2015 to 2020 with this. So what I did was I went back all the way to 2005, and I looked at from 2005 to 2020, what did this book do? And it returned approximately 9% year over year. Now in 2020, this book was going for around $210. So that would mean if it had no more return, if it was 0%, it would still be a $210 book. But at a 9% return, it would be a $270 book today. And honestly, I think 0% return is not realistic. This book is a very in-demand book. It's a very popular character. And I think that the 9% is much closer to what its actual return is long-term. And so, yes, I do recognize that if it was a 0% return, it would still have a 21% downside. But I think much more realistically, it has a little bit of an upside. It's right around where I think this book should be valued right now. I have a potential 2% upside, meaning that this book really has corrected back to approximately where it should be today. And so to me, if this is a book that you've been waiting for, because it really did get very expensive for a while, this is a book you've been waiting for, prices look pretty reasonable right now, and I think the downside is relatively small. All right, so now let's move on to number 8. And this was tough because this is a very important book, but Spider-Man has a number of key issues that are part of the Copper Age, so I feel like that maybe dilutes them a little bit, but this is Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 8. This is this classic Spider-Man black suit cover. It is not the first appearance of the black suit, but it is the first appearance of the symbiote that becomes Venom. This is a very important and significant book for Marvel, for Spider-Man, for the lore of Venom and everything that's come after it for decades. Now, the most common grade, again, is a 9.6. And here, even more copies are on the census than the last one. We've got a total of 27,812 copies on census, with 23,305 universals. Just in a 9.6, 6,802 and 5,789 universals. So there are a ton of these books out there. The current price for a 9.6 is about $310, and it had a growth of about 11% from 2015 to 2020. That was around its annual return. That would put its current price at $255. This book was going for around $185 back in 2020. We applied that 11% return, and we're at about $255. So here again, we're seeing a downside risk with this one, an 18% downside risk. Everything Venom during the comic boom got very, very expensive, and this was no exception. There were a lot of different factors. I mean, just the comic boom in general, but you also had the Null storyline, you had the Venom movie, you had that huge sale for the original art that was one of the interior pages for this comic, went for like, remember, it was like $2.6 million or something along those lines. So a lot of things were really pushing up the value in this book, and it has corrected quite a bit. It had a peak sale of $563. It's down around 45% since then, but I still think it has a little bit more to give. I think that this one is one that I would be avoiding still right now. I think you could get it cheaper a little bit later. All right, now the next one, we're moving to an independent book. This was one that I actually felt I could talk about. There was enough sales data to include it here, so I wanted to include this one. This is Evil Ernie number 1. Now, this is the first appearance of Evil Ernie, but more importantly, this is the first appearance of Lady Death. She is a character that has been consistently around now for over 30 years. It is a very popular character, and this is when you first saw her. The first appearance of her is in this book, Evil Ernie number 1. Her first cover appearance is in Evil Ernie number 2. Now, the most common grade, slightly lower than the other ones we were talking about, just a 9.4. You can see a lot less copies out there, and that's the difference between having a Marvel or a DC title versus this, which is Eternity, was the publisher. Now, the total copies on census, 909 with 785 universals. We had at a 9.4, 182 copies, and 157 of those being universals. In a 9.4, this book is currently going for around $650. It had a 12% growth rate prior to the comic boom from 2015 to 2020. It was going for about $350 before the big spikes in prices. If we apply that 12% growth rate to $350, this book should currently be going for around $490. So a pretty big downside risk to this one right now, a downside of 25%. Now, this one did have a peak sale last year of $795. It's come down just 18% since then. A lot of the other books we've talked about, they spiked a little bit more, but they've also come down more. This one just hasn't come down enough yet. I think that part of the reason it hasn't corrected as much is it is relatively scarce in comparison. I'm not saying this is a scarce book, but scarce in comparison to the other Copper Age key books. So they don't sell quite as often, and it takes a little bit longer for that correction to take place. So if you're really looking for one of these, I would be a little more patient. I think it still has a little ways to drop before I would be picking up this book. All right, now we're going to move on to number 6. This is the last one that's part of this video. Then you're going to jump over to the Fanalytics video for the top 5. So number 6, felt like this is kind of an interesting one. I picked Hulk number 340. I know my face here is kind of blocking the important image, but the reason I picked this one is it's not even really a key issue. There's nothing really key about the issue itself, but this is one of the most recognizable covers of the Copper Age. This is the Hulk versus Wolverine, where Hulk is reflected in Wolverine's claws, done by Todd McFarlane. And this cover, other than probably Amazing Spider-Man 300, also by McFarlane, has probably been homaged more than just about any other cover out there. Most common grade for this is a 9.6. Quite a few copies of this one out there, 12,241 on census with 9,887 blue labels. And I bet a lot of those that aren't blue labels are signed. They're probably the yellow labels because this book gets signed all the time. People love getting the signatures on the claws. It always looks really cool when you've got a different signature on each claw. It looks really awesome. Now, the current price for a 9.6 is about $350. This book, prior to the comic boom from 2015 to 2020, had a pretty strong growth rate, around 14%. If we apply that to its price in 2020, which is about $220, this book would be going for around $325. So that is just a 7% downside risk. And honestly, you can probably find the book around that price. If you're patient, wait for an auction, something like that, you could probably get it for $325 or even a little bit less than that. So definitely one that I think you could be picking this book up right now, especially given it has that 14% growth rate. That'll make up that 7% very quickly as long as those trends continue with this book. So this one I feel like is a pretty safe buy right now, pretty limited downside. Now, it did get very expensive during the comic boom. A 9.6 had a peak sale of $860 in 2021. It is down 60% since then. Like I said, to me, this one looks pretty appealing if you've been waiting to pick up this book. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the first half of this video. Make sure you go over to the Fanalytics YouTube channel for books 5 through 1, as well as a chance to get that giveaway. I will have the details for their channel in the description of this video. And again, if you would like to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, like button, all that kind of stuff. We've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button is right here. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.